Hi, I'm Lars, and this is my land. In my land, I get to do pretty much whatever I want, and I see y'all out here talking about Band on the Run, like it's Revolver and Pet Sounds and Dark Side of the Moon, and I don't listen to albums on purpose for videos. I wait. I started to feel like I was missing out on something. A cursory glance into the history alone of this album reveals that the fact it got made was a feat in itself. So today I'm going to talk about Band on the Run, the album with a rough start, a weird middle, and a spectacular ending. And you're gonna listen, because it's my land. Welcome to Annoying Memos Land. Beep, 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 beep. If you're new here, I talk mostly about the Beatles, but I'm also interested in TV and movies, and that is a cat pawing at my door. We're gonna keep going. I haven't gotten around to the TV and movies yet because I've been working on a video essay on the TV show Lost for so long now that if I don't mention it in every video I do, I'd have to find an answer to the age-old question, are we human or are we dancer? And Lars Land is a place of fun and fanciful daydreams. We are not outfitted for such a weighty philosophical discussion. I would absolutely love it if you would like and subscribe and all of that jazz. It helps me out a whole lot and it's free. I'm awesome. Come hang out with me. All right, let's go back to my land. Hey, this is me from like the future. This cat causes like, this is an issue. He's cute, but he's here, okay? Jack, stop. Oh my God. It's a good video, okay? It's Jack. Ah! Generally, my Beatles reviews are more robust, and my non-Beatles reviews are not. My plan was to Goldilocks this and aim for 22 to 30 minutes, but y'all see how that worked out. Now, let's begin a section I like to call, oh, you thought that album was weird? Strap in for this. Wings starts rehearsals for their new album in late July 1973 under quite a bit of pressure because this is Wings' third and Paul's fifth post-Beatles album. Paul took an absolute battering ram. You're so stupid. In the press post-Beatles breakup, due to a combination of things that are most certainly a different video. Paul's reputation is all but demolished, and his musical prestige in the popular zeitgeist has been substantially knocked off. I'm obviously not talking about that today. Can you spare an extra hour, let alone an extra video? But that context is meaningful as we're going into what happens next. Wings was plagued with lineup issues, which is a different video. And this album fell victim to this. Summarizing, fed up with Linda McCartney's inclusion in the band, disputes over creative decisions and payroll, guitarist Henry McCullough and drummer Denny Seiwell, right? I looked it up, left the band in August 1973 following rehearsals for Band on the Run album. McCullough also objected to McCartney's domineering attitude towards him as a guitar player, while Seiwell had long felt aggrieved at the lack of a formalized financial arrangement and his status as a lowly paid sideman. Ready to record somewhere exotic and cool, Paul looked at the Paul looked at a list of EMI studio locations and thought, Lagos, Nigeria. That sounds awesome. There were concerns. Geoff Emerick, the Beatles producers from 66 on, he engineered this album. Paul produced. They worked incredibly closely. So during 7 weeks in Africa, they were together almost all the time. And luckily, there's been a lot of information in his book, Here, There, and Everywhere by Geoff Emerick and Howard Massey. Sources, as always, linked in the description. So as much as Paul wanted to have kind of a work vacation where they could laze on the beach all day and record all night, Jack, oh my God. Yes? There's nothing going on in here. He's eating. I'm sorry if you hear like a clicking noise, that's him. As much as Paul wanted to find this exotic place to record where they could laze on the beach all day and work all night, Lagos was not exactly the best place to be. The country was still reeling from Nigeria's 1970 revolution, run by a corrupt and dangerous military government and rampant with disease. They had to get vaccines just to travel there, and once they returned, Paul found out that the McCartneys had a letter from EMI Studios telling them, do not go to Africa, post-dated before they left because of a cholera outbreak. Oops. Geoff said that instead of the beautiful work vacation, they'd gotten open drainage, lizards, and monsoons. And I mean that. The band stayed in villas that were overrun by lizards, which Geoff hated so much that he went to a hotel, and he has some harrowing stories about cockroaches and Coca-Cola bottles, but I like you guys, so I'm going to leave it out. Ugh. The McCartney girls came along. Paul and Linda were always very involved parents. They never had help or a nanny or anything, so their kids were always there. Geoff said that they were incredibly well behaved, but they did have a collection of lizards that they kept in a cage and would like spook him with it, which I think is awesome and very Paul coded. Anyway, back on track. For no particular reason, Paul and I hadn't spoken since our initial phone conversation, so I had no idea of the problems he was dealing with. And he had no idea about the reservations I was starting to have about the wisdom of the entire enterprise. It had originally seemed like such an exciting adventure, but in the days before we were due to depart, my nerves were beginning to get frayed. Beyond the fact that I didn't know anything about the living condition in Lagos, I had no idea what the studio had in the way of equipment, so I didn't know what kind of hurdles I'd be facing technically. No advanced research had been done, which in hindsight was really quite foolish. Geoff was disheartened when he saw the studio. It was little more than a shack from the outside, but not the worst on the inside because EMI always shipped their old equipment to their other studios. He said that it was kind of like McDonald's. You go and get the same burger everywhere. You go and get the same EMI experience everywhere. So they tried to do that. However, there were problems. Not brand spanking new, but not hopeless. The studio wasn't equipped to play 8 tracks at once, despite having an 8-track recorder. Because previous acts only played live, they had no experience with overdubs. A separate AC unit had to be brought into the control room to stop the equipment from overheating. The studio, however, was oppressively hot. Open the back door of the studio and you find a group of topless men in ankle-deep water pressing records. Outside the studio, it was noisy. Luckily, the soundproofing was decent and generally uncomfortable, but Geoff said that he's convinced they couldn't have done it better anywhere else. For all the technical limitations and bizarre surroundings, we managed to get a good sound out of that little studio. To this day, I don't quite know how we did it, but Band on the Run, as the album came to be known, turned out to be somewhat of a landmark recording. I'm convinced, in fact, that it wouldn't have sounded any better if we had done it entirely at a state-of-the-art London studio, all of which goes to show that the music is all that counts. While some of it was what Paul envisioned, the band and the McCartney family spent days at a local country club swimming, and they record every night, often past midnight and many times until dawn later in those 7 weeks. Even though things were tense before they went to Africa with the band and things were kind of funky at the studio, things went relatively smoothly as far as personnel went. Denny was clearly the third wheel, but Paul nonetheless had regard for his abilities and opinions. If Denny made a musical suggestion, Paul would consider it seriously and incorporate it if he liked what he was hearing. It wasn't like John talking to Paul where they really did consider each other to be equals, but the two men clearly had a mutual respect, and I didn't pick up any tensions between them during the Lagos sessions. Denny also seemed to have a good solid friendship with Linda, and he got along great with the kids too. Although it undoubtedly inspired the title track, Paul and Linda never talked much about the musicians who had quit on the eve of the sessions. It was Denny who actually was most resentful that the other members of Wings hadn't turned up. His attitude was very screw them, let's muck in and make a good album without him. He seemed determined to impress Paul and not let the team down. Denny was the putative? Came across a word I don't know how to pronounce.
Putative.
There, guitarist in the band, but that didn't stop Paul from playing many of the solos and the difficult bits himself. Paul didn't exactly treat Denny like a sideman, but he also never hesitated to tell him what he thought. Overall, however, the 3 members of Wings worked well as a unit. The conditions were bad, but the vibe was great. We always did have fun during those sessions. Great that the studio was great, but one night, Paul and Linda were on a walk, and they were mugged at knife point.
I said, listen, mate, it's very nice of you to stop, but we don't want a lift. I'm like, everyone's nice.
Yeah.
He's offering us a lift. Suddenly, all the doors open, and 5 young chaps get out.
And then you
And
realise.
there's a little squat one who's got a knife. Oh, that's what it was all along.
Linda screamed, "Don't kill him, he's Beetle Paul."
Linda was great. She's screaming at him. She said, leave him alone! Leave him alone! He's a musician! Like, that's gonna help.
And Paul surrendered his money, but he also surrendered his bag, which had all of the demo tapes and notebooks with lyrics for what he'd written for this album. "You're lucky you're a white man," Odeon, which is the studio's manager, said. "If you were black, you would have been killed. Everyone here believes that white people can't tell us apart. If they thought you could have identified them to the police, they would have finished you off." Paul blanched visibly. Linda looked as if she was about to faint, but he was always one to try to make the best of a bad situation. "I think I can remember how most of the songs went," he told us. "And those that I can't remember, well, I guess I'll have to write some new ones." That was how easy it was for Paul to compose music and lyrics. If he needed to, he could literally knock off a song in an hour or 2.
Yeah, so that was the thing. They took all the demo tapes along with everything else. But I'd remembered everything. But then I had lyric sheets and stuff. And, you know, once you've written a song, a lyric sheet's often all you need just to go, oh yeah, that's how it goes.
Paul remembered Jet Mrs. Vandebilt. Sorry if I mispronounce. In the US, there's like a huge family and university called Vanderbilt. And I'll do my best to go with Vandebilt, but you know, I'm stupid. So Band on the Run had been written before they came to Lagos, so Paul remembered it but tweaked the lyrics a bit to mirror what he was going through with losing the band. There was a bit of other drama. Ginger Baker, Cream's drummer, which I know very nothing about, so sorry, thought that they'd be recording in his ARC studio, which is also in Nigeria. Paul maintained that he had promised no such thing, that he had only ever planned to record at EMI, but he sued the situation by offering a compromise. They would go visit Ginger's studio and they recorded there for a day. Picasso's last words, for the most part, was recorded in the studio. Baker even played percussion on it and he tried to sell it, come record in my studio, but Paul said, no, we already made our agreement. Sorry. They went back, relatively little harm done. And then, on a Friday, shortly into a session, Paul was singing an overdub and something went wrong. But everyone was in a good mood and looking usually aplomb when all of a sudden he started gasping for air. Within seconds, he'd turn as white as a sheet, explaining to us in a croaking voice that he couldn't catch his breath. We decided to take him outside for some fresh air, which probably wasn't the smartest thing to do, because once he was exposed to the blazing heat, he felt even worse and began keeling over, finally fainting dead away at our feet. Linda began screaming hysterically. She was convinced that he was having a heart attack. I shouted at Monday, studio staff, to run inside and fetch the studio manager, Odeon. Odeon dashed out and quickly assessed the situation. We were pleading with him to call an ambulance, but he coolly explained that Paul would get to the local hospital in his car a lot sooner than any ambulance could. Paul was starting to come around by this point, but we lifted him off the ground and gently deposited him in the back seat. Then Linda and one of the roadies piled into the car and they went roaring down the street. In the silent aftermath, Denny and I looked at each other. Was Paul indeed having a heart attack? What on earth was going to happen next? We went back into the studio, worried and deeply concerned, and tried to fill the time by doing a guitar overdub, but our minds weren't really on what we were doing. A few hours later, we got a call from Linda saying that Paul was okay, that he had been released from the hospital and was on his way back to the villa. And she told us he was stubbornly insisting that we go back into the studio on Monday at the normal time. When we all returned to work after the weekend, Paul looked a little shaken but was otherwise okay. The official diagnosis was that he had suffered a bronchial spasm brought on by too much smoking. Thankfully, Paul never had another incident like that. There was also a confrontation with political activist and Afrobeat pioneer Fela Kuti, who publicly accused the band of being in Africa to exploit and steal African music after their visit to his club. So they go there and he's like, why are y'all here? What are you doing in my country, in my club and stuff? And Paul sued the situation and he's like, dude, it's fine, I'm sorry, we're leaving. And so as soon as they left, Geoff said that Paul was like super shaken, he was super concerned, and Geoff was like, maybe you're being paranoid. No. A few days later, he goes on radio and says that Paul is there to exploit the music and cause problems and all kinds of stuff. So then Paul gets a hold of Fela Kuti and says, come to the studio, I'll play some of our music for you. They went. He came with like people and Paul played the music, and once he realized that they did indeed not sound the same, that he could be okay, and he left them alone. I didn't mention this before, and maybe it's because of the timing of the video, thanks YouTube, but right after the band landed in Nigeria, Denny Lane saw a man get knocked off a moped and die just like immediately. Welcome party! Woo! So, like I said, recording took 7 weeks in Nigeria and the band went home on September 23rd. But of course, only after their plane was delayed with mechanical issues. 2 weeks later, they go into George Martin's Air Studios to polish some stuff up. Jet's recording in full happened here. Unfortunately, this was plagued with issues too. Some oxide shedding had gotten onto the tape, which Geoff had noticed when the cymbals disappeared off the top of the track. This is a problem. If oxide shedding builds up, it can make the tape unplayable and even damage the equipment. To tell Paul or not to tell Paul, that is the question. Geoff ultimately decided not to, based almost solely on not wanting to harsh the vibe. I'm not kidding. Every time that they'd play the song back to him, he would just turn up the treble on the monitors to mask the lack of the sound. The tape was almost unplayable. He said he could see through it, and another go probably could make it unplayable. Denny offered, let me do one more on that guitar track, and Paul said no. As soon as they left the studio, Geoff went and put it on another tape. He was like, I'm copying this over now. Arrangements for the album were laid down in a single day, conducted by Tony Visconti. Final mixing was completed in 3 days at London's Kingsway Studios. Mixing wasn't rushed, but it was hurried. They tried to pull strings to get more time in studio, but the management wouldn't budge, and Paul started to get a little concerned, and it's just, I have to read this, okay? Oh my God. Like, this is the stupidest thing. I can't. Just in case we didn't get all the mixes done in 3 days we had allotted, Paul had come up with a contingency plan. He was going to kidnap me. What? To make it look real, he was literally going to hire a couple of guys to abduct me outside my house and spirit me away to some other studio to finish the mixes. He was that serious about it too. They were going to do it properly so that no one would know where I was. That way I wouldn't be held accountable by Jerry or by Air for not showing up at the Tempest sessions. Geoff said he knew that the album was going to be a success and that he's honored to be a part of it, but he didn't sense that Paul had felt so confident. Perhaps he'd become gun-shy after being eviscerated in the press for so long for both his musical and personal decisions. He was more apt to wait it out, see how it went. Now this section I affectionately call, okay, they liked it. Okay, they liked it. The album was received mostly positively. Reviewers said that this was exactly the records that the public had hoped he would make. Paul was praised for the album, which was bursting with compelling music, even though the lyrics make as much sense as that cover photo. The album's production was called fresh and natural and of the Beatles' caliber. A relatively negative review from Robert Christgau of Village Voice said in 1981 that he originally underrated the album, but not as much as admirers overrated. He said it was a relief after Wings' previous attempts, but ultimately gave it a C+. This is the most negative review of the album. It's mostly 10s across the board. As far as Beatles solo work goes, it's regarded as one of the Holy Trinity. Generally, Plastic Ono Band, which you guys outvoted for this album, All Things Must Pass, and Band on the Run. Of course, he's not quite as smart as John and not quite as deep as George, a sentiment that is echoed throughout his entire career. The rub of being a Beatle, well, there are many of them, but in this case specifically, is that you can never do something without that measuring stick. What about the other mop tops? Do you live up to your legacy? Do you deserve it? Many critics thought that this album passed the test. Band on the Run is a great album. If anybody ever puts down McCartney in your presence, bust him in the snoot and play him this. He will thank you for it afterwards. Facty Facts. Released December 5th, 1973 in the US, December 7th in the UK. It was commercially mid at first. The public was a little concerned about buying Paul after things had not gone so well critically recently. It ranked 9th in the UK before dropping to 13th and 7th on Billboard, then spending subsequently 6 weeks in the top 10. Success came later after the singles Hell on Wheels, and check the screen for convoluted Hell on Wheels info, we're not going there. Jet, which was released January 28th, 1974, and Band on the Run, which was released as a single April 4th, 1974, popped off and allowed the album to grow in success. It hit second on the UK charts in March 1974. It hit first on Billboard April 13th, and again on June 8th, and again on June 28th, and finally number 1 in the UK on July 27th. It went on to be the year's top-selling album in the US and Australia, and second in the UK behind the Carpenters' singles compilation. It's been lauded in history. It's been ranked 75 on Q Magazine's 100 Greatest British Albums Ever, and 418th on Rolling Stone's 2012 50 Greatest Albums of All Time. All right, let's listen. I haven't listened to this before, and I'm very excited. I only listen to 3 to 7 seconds of music straight due to copyright, and sometimes I will have little bits of myself in between. I call them interrupters. I know it's annoying. I've explained it more in the description box. I love you. I'm sorry. Band on the Run. This is from Paul McCartney's The Lyrics. The word band in the title of the song refers mostly to the idea of a group of people who've escaped prison, a band of desperados. Certain aspects of it remind me of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. The Undertaker is ringing a bell because he's upset he's had so few customers. Sailor Sam's a character out of Rupert Bear, the comic strip by Mary Turtle. Pronunciation. I don't see a pronunciation guide on this, I'm sorry. I hope I'm doing okay. But he fitted in somehow. As it happens, the song was recorded in Lagos, Nigeria in an EMI studio. Lagos sounded good, exotic. It wasn't quite what I'd imagined. I hadn't imagined cholera or the mugging or the half-ready studios or my children being told they weren't allowed in the hotel swimming pool because they were naked. What? Whoa. I hadn't read, by the way, I haven't read this stuff through. I just took it from the book. Maka, I love you, baby, but you gotta put your kids in swimsuits. They can't be just running around bare ass. Come on. You block out all the worst stuff and you remember all the cool stuff. Chief Abiola said, hey, hello, Mac. He called me Mac. Mac, why you have no 4 wives? One's enough trouble, Chief. The main thing is it's a story song, a song about freedom. A lot of us at that time felt free from strictures of civilization. That's one of the great things about rock and roll. It does allow you to break the rules. One rule often broken is that a piece of music has to be highly complex to be any good. I've mentioned it time and time again, but it's worth remembering that when the Beatles started, we had very few musician skills. We knew only a few chords, but we developed to the point that when we broke up, we had become quite a sophisticated machine. With Wings, we would show up at student unions and say, can we do a gig? Because we knew they had a hall and they had people. We charged 50 pence at the door. We only had 11 songs, so we had to repeat some of them. Some of the gigs must have been quite bad because we didn't really know what we were doing. Yeah, right. I bet that it was quite bad. Paul McCartney. My ass. I have not listened to this song on purpose since I became a Beatles fan in April 2022. I did not know that that was this song. I recognize this, obviously, but like I know the chorus of the song. I did not know that that was this song. I dig this. Ooh, that's very nice. Ooh, that's very nice. Oh. Baby boy. Yes, I really like that Paul voice. That's a good Paul voice. That's cool. That's very different. I did not expect that arrangement. There we go. This is the part that I recognize here. I have not, like I said, not listened to this stuff on purpose, right? Very nice. Cool voice, Polly. Little solo guitar licks are a very nice addition here. Oh, I like that end. That is such a Maka little... Let's scooch back. Oh, listen to that. Editing, Lars, would you hate me so much? Would you hate me so much if I ask you very kindly to put in Maka's vocals after he finds out that Yoko got divorced? Please?
No. Just heard that Yoko's divorce has just gone through. Free at last. I'm free.
I love you.
It's okay.
Listen. My baby. All right, Jet, which is about their pony. Okay, we've got more to read. When we were in the Beatles, we'd learned to write hit songs. We were the Beatles, after all, so we had to. We couldn't write flops. That wouldn't have been right for the Beatles. So I developed a knack for writing a popular song or a hit. At this time, I was deliberately trying to make Wings sound different from the Beatles, but the tricks of the trade still applied. So when it came to Jet, I had loads of tricks that I could use. One of them is shouting. That works. A shout is always a good opener. Jet was actually the name of a pony, a little Shetland pony that we'd had for kids on the farm. My daughter Mary was born in 1969, so in 1973, when the song was written, she was 4. Stella would have been 2, so they were little. But to know that Jet is a pony is about as important or unimportant as knowing that Martha in Martha My Dear is a sheepdog. I remember exactly how the song started. We were in Scotland, I had my guitar, surprise, surprise. There was a big hill which had the site of a fortress on top of it, an old Celtic fort. It's now primarily an ordnance survey marker. It was an extraordinarily good vantage point, the kind where you could imagine the Vikings coming up the hill while we poured oil over them. What? What is he talking about? He's so weird. What are you talking about? Okay, sorry, okay. I feel like Billie Eilish right now.
It's the location that will make your Uber driver say, "You sure?"
Okay. Okay. You can imagine the Vikings coming up the hill while we poured oil on them, or if that didn't work, threw some spears at them. There were some lovely little spots on the hillside where we all like to hang out. I had told Linda I'd be gone for a while, and as I lay there on this beautiful summer's day, I let my mind wander. Some of the imagery is drawn from the relationship between Linda and her father. He was a cool guy, very accomplished. Are you bragging about your own lawyer? Different videos, but he was a little too patriarchal for my liking, damn. I got on well with him, but he was a bit strict. That's partly where the sergeant major comes from. He also comes partly from Gilbert and Sullivan in the very model of modern major general. Partly, too, from Bootsy and Snudge, the UK television sitcom, which had a character called Sergeant Major Cloud Snudge. Mater, or mother, goes back to my Latin class in school. This is an imaginary mother figure, though I think it's fair to say that the ghost of my real mother always loomed somewhere in the background. Anyhow, I made it all up, played it on the guitar, came back to the farmhouse and played it for Linda. I asked her what she thought. She liked it, and that's what came out of my afternoon up on the hill. This wasn't Mount Sinai, and I didn't come back with the tablets of law, but I did come back with Jed. He's so f***ing weird. I love him so much. Also, I should mention, because I know I'm gonna get on it, is that he's also said that he started the song about a Labrador, but there's also like a quote somewhere where Paul says most of the lyrics he writes about, or sometimes he, like, it doesn't mean anything, so it doesn't really matter if he was just thinking about a black animal. I don't think that this is something where we need to go, well, he said this, because, God, we do get that shit. Well, I don't know, in my comments, if people are gonna hate somebody, they hate John. Between you, me, and Dupree, honestly, I had a video, it's only like 2 minutes. It's called Jack, come on. It's called Remembering John Lennon. It's private now. It's never coming back. And it was just I put it up on December 8th, 2022. And the comments, I got a lot of hate comments for John on that video. And if you're gonna pick a video, like, okay, stop, Cujo, relax. Sorry, it's later. Had to manage the cat. All right, Jet. This is like so dramatic and like really foxy sounding to me. Very nice. Love the horns, the instrumentation, the brass, whatever that is. I love it. Let's see what we got. Saxophone and a Moog synthesizer. That sounds cool. I like the harmonies. That sounds good. Ooh. Oh, piano trill here. That's pretty cool. Very groovy kind of switch up there. That's a hell of an ending right there. Jesus. Bluebird. The harmonies were something that Geoff talked a lot about in his book. There were a lot of time spent on harmonies, and I held this in the script because I knew that there would be a time about Linda. A lot of people have lots of feelings about Linda being in the band because she's not musical, and Linda herself said that she's not musical. Okay, let me just read what he said. I personally don't have feelings about it at this point. I just don't. I have too many things to care about, and this is not one of them. She was a quick study, too. During the Band on the Run sessions, she'd started to learn how to read the expressions on my face. If she thought her singing was a bit out of tune, she'd just peer into the control room and would know how to interpret a certain look from me. To me, Linda was always an integral part of the band's sound. If you take her voice out of the vocal harmonies, it's just not Wings anymore. Honestly, what I know about the good parts of the trip in Legos, this sounds like that, just this vibe. By the way, if I get any shit about how I'm saying that,
Lagos, easy, Lagos.
But from what I know about how their trip was, I feel like this is very much the vibe, you know, out on the beach, getting tan, swimming naked. What is that? Remy Kabaka on percussion. That's all I have. I don't have. You're a bluebird, you're a bluebird, you're a bluebird. Hey, so I was looking up this percussion, and the Wikipedia for the song says, in 2017, Rolling Stone magazine ranked Bluebird as McCartney's 4th greatest post-Beatles songs, stating that it features a bittersweet melody that only McCartney could have written, carried along by a guitar that lilts Brazilian bossa nova and soft touch percussion from Nigerian instrumentalist Remy Kabaka. This is the only Nigerian who plays on the album, but he didn't record it in Nigeria. It was in London. Mrs. Vandebilt. When we were first in the Beatles, we used to get asked whether we were worried that we might have joined the establishment. We thought the establishment was a club in London, which indeed it was. We didn't really know precisely what it meant, except that we were now part of the status quo. Of course, we insisted that we weren't part of anything posh. We knew a few posh people, but that was it. If you were on a quiz show and had to come up with a list of names that embodied vast wealth, you'd have Rockefeller, Giddy, Vanderbilt. He said Vanderbilt in here. There are certain names you know because they're in the newspaper all the time. The super rich. The problem with being rich is what comes with it is often quite bothersome. For example, I've got a little sailboat which I can sail by myself. I can get in and out of the water by myself. Just the other day, someone reminded me that it was really a kid's boat. I went, okay, I'm a kid. I'm not sure if they would understand that I just don't want a bigger boat, the kind adults might have. If I have a bigger boat, I'll need a crew, and I don't want a crew. The problem with getting involved with Mrs. Vandebilt, sorry, I'm petting my cat over here because I'm trying to get him to relax, is that it comes with a lot of society's rules. I've got to invite for cocktails all these people whom I don't like. I'm the kind of person who will go to Mrs. Vandebilt's cocktail party once. That's the way I've led my life. I like this idea of the alternative being the norm and then dipping into or playing with this other world that I really don't want to, into which I will never quite belong. Down in the jungle, living in a tent, you don't use money, you don't pay rent, is a riff on a song on the British comedian Charlie Chester, who was a mainstay of radio when I was a kid. It's also a worldview that I find very attractive. Hippie-dom, dropping out. Living on your own private Greek island with your bandmates. He was the one who didn't want that, though. I don't want Mrs. Vandebilt or her ilk to intrude on my tranquil time. She's going to spoil it for me. She's going to make me obey rules that I don't want to obey. She's going to pull me up into her cloud of money and influence and authority. I would rather be spending... Hey, don't bite. I would rather be spending my time with the Eleanor Rigbys of the world. Me too. Just as Mrs. Vandebilt morphs into Mrs. Washington, who represents the political capital of America, so the phrase, I've got plenty of time of my own, turns into I've got plenty of time on my own. Even though the song was written long before my 1980 arrest in Japan, which I spent 9 nights in jail for possession of marijuana. What a king. I had been incarcerated a couple of times before in Hamburg too, only for a day, not overnight, so this feeling was familiar to me. In short, that's Jack. In short, Mrs. Vandebilt is a figure of authority and wealth and rules and money that the protagonist of the song doesn't want to know about. He wants to be left alone, and that's me, very much who I am. I'm never happier than when I'm in the middle of the woods on a horse making a trail. Any chance I have, I like to be out on my own in the woods. I dig it. I already dig it. Ooh. I like it. I really like this. That bit right there. Dang, that shit goes hard. Maka sounds good here. Good vocals. Very nice. Good old bass line right there. That's sassy and I like it. Okay. Guys, this goes really hard. Hot. The use of the acoustic guitar as percussion in this is really nice, and that's something that all the Beatles are actually really good at. All of them, whether or not they use it a lot, just because of their history in skiffle and the fact that they had a rocky relationship with drummers early on. One of their things was saying like the percussion is in the guitars when they were trying to get booked, and you can really hear it. It sounds really nice in this one. It's like you're just really making use of the entirety of the instrument because the guitar is so much more than just, you know, a melody. Let Me Roll It, bog echo. We'd always called it bog echo because it's like the echo in a toilet known to us as a bog. We'd shout up to the control room, "Can we have the bog echo, please?" And they would ask, "Do you want it at 7.5 inches per second or 15 inches per second?" And we would say, "We don't know, play them both." The echo was on the tape in those days. Short bog echo, long bog echo. It was very Gene Vincent, very Elvis. John loved this tape echo and used it more than any of us, so it became the signature sound on his solo records. I'm acknowledging that by using it here. I remember first singing Let Me Roll It and thinking, yeah, this is very like a John song. It's in John's area of vocalization, needless to say, but the most Lennon-esque thing is the echo. The single most significant element in this song is not the echo, though. It's not the vocalization. It's not the lyrics. It's the guitar riff. The word that comes to mind is searing. It's a searing little thing. We can talk about lyrics till the cows come home, but a good riff is a rare beauty. Agreed! This one is so dramatic that people in the audience gasp when they hear it because it stops so abruptly. It feels like everything freezes. Time freezes. When we do talk about lyrics, I think it's fair to say that roll it has to do with rolling a joint. I don't think that's going to come as a surprise to anyone. There was a lot of pot smoking in an audience back in the day when smoking was still allowed in venues. When I play live now, I sometimes wonder whether the audience isn't a bit prudish. I don't know, man. I go to a lot of shows and there's a lot of weed at a lot of shows. There's more weed than there is cigarettes. And a lot of time it's vapes and edibles being so widely available now. Sir Paul, don't you worry. Your kids are still f***ed up out in the audience. Then I smell on it and think, well, that's all right. That smells good. That probably happens more at festivals, though. It's probably easier not to get caught by security. Let Me Roll It is a love song at its heart. The other erotic sense of rolling is that part and parcel of rock and roll is very much part of it. The image of my heart is like a wheel, so let me roll it to you is one that anyone can connect with. Anyone can understand how exposed you feel when you offer your heart to or reveal your affections for another person. It's very difficult. The hesitation we feel in that situation of wanting to reach out but being reluctant to be completely open is made physical in the abrupt starting and stopping of the riff. The constant cutting short of the momentum of the song mimes the subject matter. We all relate to that situation. A year or two back, I saw a musical called Be More Chill by Joe Iconis in the Joe Tracks about a nerdy boy who can't say that he loves someone. He has a speech impediment, a nervous stammer. Let Me Roll It is sort of a long, drawn-out stammer. Oh, I see. Yeah. It's jarring. Not just the riff, but the percussion with it. But those harmonies are really good. Those are really nice right there. Bog echo is growing on me as the song goes. It's very emotional. Woo! I enjoyed that very much. Mamunia. I like that. I like how his voice sounds. Oh. Got impatient. I like the bass. I like... Okay. I've got a cat at the door. He's in the other room, so hopefully we'll be okay. Mamunia means safe haven in Arabic, and it is the title of a house, or the name of a house in Lagos. These lyrics sound like they may have been written in a self-soothing way of, I know it's monsoon season here, I know it won't stop raining, but this is what we got. This is a sweet song. No words. I should mention that Denny Lane has a co-writing credit on this song. When I think of how this sounds, this is what I think of like the early 70s sounding like. Like this is the sound of the early 70s to me. This kind of... I don't know how to describe what I'm saying. This sound right there. Play that again. Right there. Very epic, and considering what I know about the production, considering what you know about the production. And yeah, we know that like all of the instrumentation arrangements and such are put in later, right? But it's like, man, there were people right out there ankle deep in water and they made this. You know, it's pretty crazy. So far on this album, this is the one that sounds most Beatlesy to me. Picasso's last words. Drink to me. Picasso's last words started as a dare. I'd met Dustin Hoffman because he was filming Papillion in Jamaica, and we'd gone round to his house in Montego Bay. He said to me, "Can you write a song about anything?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, maybe." He said, "Just a minute," and he ran upstairs and came down with a Time magazine article about the death of Picasso. He then said, "See what Picasso's last words were?" The article reported that when Picasso died in April 1973, there were some friends with him, and his last words were, "Drink to me, drink to my health. You know I can't drink anymore. Please stop getting..." Okay. Dustin asked, "Could you write a song about that?" I didn't know, but I had my guitar with me, so I hit a chord and started singing a melody to those words, and he was flabbergasted. He said to his then wife, "Anne, come here. Listen to this. I just gave Paul this and he's already got the song." The whole thought was there just in the challenge of doing it for Dustin, so I was just concentrating on the words he'd stuck in front of me. I think what was nice is that he'd obviously seen those words as melodic himself. He's an actor, so he understands the rhythm of words, and I think when he read the quote, he might have thought, "This flows beautifully." It was a pleasure to do it, just to show off a little bit. I am lucky that it's something that comes naturally to me. I think the rhythm of the words influences how the melody might turn out. You want to get something that rolls along naturally and that's interesting at the same time, but that also fits with the music you're hearing. Sometimes you might have to alter a word because it just doesn't quite work with the meter, so you'll look for something that says more or less the same thing but with an alternate word. Maybe now it's a 2-syllable word instead of a 1-syllable word that didn't work, or the other way around. It's very important that the rhythm sounds natural. When it doesn't, it sticks out like a sore thumb. You really don't think of these specific things when you're forming the words. It's not so self-conscious, but when Dustin dared me, I thought to myself, well, I've got to set it up. The grand old painter died last night, his painting's on his wall. Before he went, he bade us well and said goodnight to us all. And it strays from the point, which a lot of my songs do, for who will ever know what Picasso did at 3 a.m, but the line sounded good. 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm getting ready for bed. It came without a warning, but I'll be waiting for you, baby. I'll be waiting for you there. And then I could use his words, drink to me. In normal speech, which is presumably what Picasso was doing, it's just something ordinary that was said earnestly, drink to me. But once it's set down in a magazine, it's halfway to becoming a poem, and someone like Dustin will read it and think, Picasso's last words. That's a great quote, and agreed. I'm always pleased when things happen like that. P.S. Helen's Wheels goes right here. It's a hidden track. It's not on the original album, okay? I like this country-ish harmony here. So it's interesting. Remember Ginger Baker was playing on this one a little bit. This was supposed to be kind of like a sampled song where there are just like bits and bits and bits of pieces of the song put together, kind of different songs thrown together to make this song kind of like Picasso's painting. But I'll be waiting for you, baby. So you will see differences throughout this song. The French interlude. Hello, good morning, wake up, here we are. I like the guitar underneath there, the strings coming up through it. This is really a cool song. I like how low they're keeping that guitar. It almost sounds like a little additional studio sound mistake almost, the way that they're keeping it right here. Like it's almost not there. I like this stuff. 1985. When I read George Orwell's 1984, I was just a kid, and I thought it was so far into the future that I mightn't live to see it. Like the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, impossibly distant. Now they're well behind us. The idea behind the song is that this is a relationship and was always meant to be. No one in the distant future is ever going to get my attention because I've got you. But when this was written, 1985 was only 12 years away. It wasn't the very distant future, only the future in this song. So basically it's a love song about the future. Sometimes you try to avoid using the word love in a song, but I also wrote a song asking what's wrong with silly love songs. It's something I think about. Love is a staggeringly important word and a staggeringly important feeling because it's going on everywhere in the whole of existence right now. I think about the whole planet and the whole human race. I think about how in China right now there are two people who love each other and they're getting married and committing their whole lives to each other. Or in South America right now there's a mother having a baby and loving this baby, and the father is loving the baby too. The point I'm making is obvious, that this love thing is global, really universal, and it's not only for humans but also for animals, which we too often forget about, and that commonality outweighs the fact that it might be soppy, but you're always trying to say it in a way that's not soppy. That's why I write about it. That's trippy. That is like a little bit futuristic right there. I really like this. Oh, it goes so hard, man. I'm not sick of this at all. Are you guys hearing this shit? It's so f***ing jammy. So groovy. I like it. The way Paul ends his album sometimes is always a little crazy. And I really like it. Like, make us remember it, baby. That's cute. That's cute. That's adorable. That's a really sweet way to end the album. Wow. I definitely didn't anticipate it being that, and I didn't anticipate it being that good. I really like it. I really like it. I think I need to listen to it a bunch more times. I think I'm gonna be listening to this a bunch more times. Now that we have listened to the album that has an incredibly odd story with a spectacular ending, I would absolutely love to know what y'all think of Band on the Run. I check comments within the first day or two, and then after that I'm out, so I might hit you back. I would absolutely love it if y'all would like and subscribe and all of that jazz. I love y'all so much, and y'all come back now you're here. Bye.
My sweet Lord. My Lord. My Lord. But it takes so long, my Lord. My sweet Lord.